management research.
Hello and welcome to the Management Research Podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Eugene. Hello and welcome to my strategic management mini-series as a part of our Management Research Podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Eugene. And today we finalize talking about the threat of entry, one of the 5 forces in the framework by Porter, the framework that aims to explain how firms can achieve sustainable competitive advantage through the correct evaluation of the market niches and their competitive positions. In the previous episodes, we talked about different drivers. Each episode was dedicated to a specific driver, a factor that has impact on how easy or how hard it is to enter your market and threaten you by this. In today's episode, we're going to talk about one of the drivers, or not about one of the drivers, rather about the effectiveness of these barriers to entry. And this will be the final episode in this force mini-series, and then we continue with the next force in the 5 forces framework. The effectiveness of barriers to entry is not cut in the stone. It can really change and we forget about it. First of all, if you remember from our previous episodes, we talk about, for instance, something like legislation. Legislation changes over time. It is not as likely to change as, let's say, the customer preferences or what is today stylish, not stylish, what is modish, not modish. It may change much faster than legislation, but legislation also changes, and it can go in both directions. That is why this barrier is not fixed, and it can happen that if you rely now on this barrier and you hope that you will have a nice, stable business in a long-term perspective, that it will not be the case. The second thing what changes are the customer preferences. We have different expectations, we have different political processes that happen in our society. Now we have the big movement towards the green economy, would like to have more sustainable firms, and in this event many preferences has already changed, and the way how people select cars, build houses, or even what kind of food they buy, it has already changed. And many people did not anticipate it only 10 years ago that now nobody is going to use the plastic forks or something like this. But now it is, first of all, it has been ignored for a long time, and I think now it is not legally prohibited. I can still see the plastic forks being sold, but usually they are very expensive because of the, I think, taxation that they introduced, and that's why now we produce the forks from wood or the forks from paper that are used by other people in order to make our environment a bit more protected and make our business a bit more sustainable. Differentiation, we talk about the differentiation, it can also change over time, and what we see now is the convergence between the Android phones and Apple phones. The Apple iOS phones, they introduced now the widgets. The widgets was the thing that Android phones used to have and the Apple phones didn't have. Now the Android phones introduced the new icons which are closer to those that we have on the iOS and so on. The animation is more or less very not equal, but approximating more or less the same standard. So the systems become very similar, which makes the differentiation easier, which makes the transition from iOS to Android or from Android to iOS easier, and where we had a huge differentiation and more or less the guarantee that people will not switch between the two systems. Now we don't have it. It becomes more and more easy to switch from one system to another system. Distribution channels, they are being constantly built. Many things happen, that is why they also will change. Sometimes you lose the channel distribution because of some political, because of some even technical things that happen, as we have now a big debate about one of the piece of autobahn that goes through Tyrol, from Germany to Italy through Tyrol. There is a big debate on how many cars should go there, and what are the capacity of this autobahn and the tunnels. And it depending, now we will have the big court that will happen in Europe, and it will be decided who will get it. The Tyroleans who don't want to have a huge transfer over the autobahn, or the Italians who actually want to increase it, which will have immediate impact on the channels of distribution and how easy you can sell some of the products in Italy, Germany, and Austria. So as you see, barriers are not fixed and you have to think about them. Don't take them for granted. They can really change overnight. The next thing that you have to bear in mind is that the more barriers you have, the higher the rates of profit. And really, when you protect your local agriculture, it makes it more profitable as compared to other agricultures. The Polish agricultural firms, the farms, and the Dutch farms, they have to compete hardly. And in Austria, you are more or less protected. But at the same time, it makes your profit so interesting that one of these firms may think about how to enter the market. And if they cannot do it with the Polish, they can also buy a farm here and start producing with their technology in their way the things that they will sell locally. So the higher the rates of profit, the more interesting it becomes for the potential entrants, and the more interesting it also becomes for their lobbyists to lobby a new law that will finally allow them to enter the market. That is why this protection has a kind of a signaling. Each time you protect something, it signals for the others that this market will be highly attractive. They just need to find a way how to avoid or how to circumvent this barrier. My final comment is about the barriers, that they may not work against some old companies as well as against those that diversify from different markets. And if you think about it, Google and the search engine, they diversified from Google and search into Android market when they developed their own operating system. It was the diversification, and I think nobody anticipated that Google search, this search engine that they developed, they all of a sudden will start producing their own operating system, and they even start producing their own phones. Initially, they just produced the system, and that they will start producing their own tablet computers and so on. That is why we see that if the firms diversify from one market to another market, they have the huge capacity, they can just apply in different places. And if the old company is already there for a long time, you cannot protect yourself from this company. It is already on the market, and you have to think twice whether you want to compete against the big behemoth. Maybe this behemoth will be not as fast and maybe very slow and will not be able to cope with the dynamics. But think about all the competences and all the resources these behemoths have. With this in mind, I want us to finalize our conversation about this threat of entry, one of the 5 forces. And in the next episode, we're going to move to the next force, and I'm not going to tell you which one. You will discover it next week. It was a pleasure. Wish you all the best, and I'll see you in the next episode. Bye bye.